In this video, we're going to be replacing the control arm on this 2011 Honda Odyssey. All right, we're going to remove the wheel. We're going to use a 22mm socket. First thing we're going to do is remove this cotter pin here. This isn't a typical cotter pin. It's got a hook on the back side. So we're going to use a small pair of bent needle nose and a hook tool. We're going to pry out that little hook on the side and pull out with the needle nose. All right, our castle nut on our ball joint is going to be a 22mm. If you happen to have a short 22mm socket, you can try and get in here. We're going to use a wrench. All right, now that you've used your muscles and you have it loose, go ahead and continue. What we're going to do is leave it almost all the way off. We're going to move on to our back bolts. All right, we're going to move to our back bolt here. It's going to be a 19mm. We have that on a breaker bar. Okay, so we have one more bolt down here. It's going to be, again, a 19mm. Now, while we have our one back bolt still in, we're going to take our castle nut right off our ball joint. We're going to put our pickle fork right about here, and we're going to hammer it in. Once that seems like it's not going to move, we're going to reposition. All right, once your ball joint's free here, we can go ahead and remove our one bolt in the back. Basically, that's just there to hold the whole assembly from falling straight out. Now at this point, you want to keep one hand on the front by the ball joint. In the back here, we're going to pull that towards you with a little bit of wiggle. Just keep rotating down and up with a little bit of downward force. And if you can't seem to work the front out here, you can get a small pry bar in here and just assist. Again, just be careful when this does come free that it doesn't land on your feet. We're going to install our new control arm. What I like to do in these bushing areas is put just a little bit of grease, oil. In this case, we're just going to use a little rust penetrant as a little lubricant. Okay, we are going to put our ball joint into position. We're going to thread our castle nut on to hold our ball joint in. And we're going to push our suspension forward. What this will allow us to do is put the rear bushing at more of a horizontal angle, which is where it wants to be in. And our front one is very close. We just have to push everything up and in. So what we'll do now is go to our rubber mallet, push our rear bushing in place. All All right, so using a long, wider Phillips, we can try and center up our bushing. All right, this one here is going to be a little tougher to line up the hole because you can't see in there, and you can hardly get a screwdriver in there to help move your bushing around. So what we've done is got this in as far as we can until we're hitting resistance. All right, so we're going to try hitting the control arm up and twisting the bolt at the same time. All right, once you think you've gotten into threads, you can take your 19mm and see if you actually have reached the thread. In our case, we are there. What we want to do is snug these up. We're not going for full tight. Before we do that, we're going to have to put the vehicle suspension under load, and then we'll torque everything down. Okay, that's snugged up. All right, so underneath we're going to take our 19mm and we're going to snug this one up as well. All right, now we can snug up our castle nut. You remember we left it on to hold the ball joint in place while we did the other two bolts. All right, so we don't want to over tighten this because we want to come back and torque everything down. So now that our control arm is pretty much bolted in and back in place, we can come back, torque all three bolts down. Now our castle nut's snugged up. What we're going to do in our case, because we're on a lift, is we're going to put a pull jack under here and raise our suspension up to simulate load on the vehicle, on the suspension, and then we'll torque all three bolts down. If you're at home and you're on a jack stand, put a jack underneath your control arm. Be careful of not damaging your ball joint, and you can raise your suspension, do the same thing. You want to torque everything down under load. All right, our back two bolts on our control arm are going to be 83 foot-pounds. All right, your castle nut. It's going to have a cotter pin that goes through it. So there's going to be two torque specs in your castle nut. First is going to be 47. It's going to be a 19mm. And then you're going to torque all the way up to, but not past 55 foot-pounds. And you're only going to torque what you need to get your cotter pin through. All right, so once you can see the hole through the ball joint stud, I'm going to go ahead and put your cotter pin through that hole. All right, once you've stuck it, what you're going to want to do is grab a small pair of needle nose. You're going to want to bend that cotter pin back to lock the pin in. Once you have your cotter pin opened and locked into position, you're done. After finishing this installation, it's important to have an alignment done on your vehicle. Okay, now that we have our lug nuts snugged up and we have the vehicle down on the ground with some weight on the suspension, we're going to torque our lug nuts to 94 foot-pounds in a crisscross pattern.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.